Marty, are you ready to start?
Yeah.
So guys, without waiting further, please meet Marty. Gregg.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm honored to be asked to do this with AIGA, as always. I'm flattered to be able to talk about our work and about journaling. So appreciate your attention. Try to keep it moving along. Tell you a little bit about the office. We've been in business for almost 25 years this year, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. Some staff has come and gone, but I've got a great team that I'm surrounded by, and it's allowed us to do the work that we do. A lot of the work we do is brand building and environmental graphics and experiential design. That is creating places that people want to be and simply calling that placemaking. We do a lot of work in the city. This is, of course, 14th Street. I hope you're familiar with that. This is wayfinding. It's kind of a magic word in our world. Some of the jobs that we work on for branding include Children's Hospital and all the satellites. We do a lot of healthcare. We were fortunate enough to work on the Denver Art Museum the first time around, and now we're working on it the second time around with the new development. Old places in town like Clayton Lane that still make me smile because of the way they have transformed the city. This is a shot of, it's not the most recent shot, but this is a shot of my team. You'll notice everybody's got pencils in their hand or pens in their hand. We communicate by drawing for each other and talking to each other all the time. Even if they're just stick figure sketches, it's really important for our communication to work that way. But we're here today to talk about journals. And this is a page out of my journal. I like to think of my journal, as probably all of us do that work on journals, as a mood board for our lives. This is a spread that I'd worked on when I was building the office that we're in, that I'm in right now. And it's a time-consuming thing, but it's every time you find a little piece of something that you like, it was easy for me to cut it out and put it in the journal. And that's what I believe the journal should be, is it's this vault. It's a holding place for all of your ideas, for your concepts, because as designers, we're always getting all these little pieces of printed ephemera and little stickers and things like that, and you never know what to do with them. But with a journal, there's always a place to paste it in, and that you can obsess about it later. This is my spread for my journal, and it's got everything from, I loved this big red wall. I loved these light fixtures. This is the suite I was looking at in the building. I even drew, a silhouette of myself the way I stand around a lot with my arms crossed, gazing out the windows. And so much of this was aspirational, what I wanted to do. And I'm kind of knocked out that years later, we built the office, and you can definitely tell that this process informed where we ended up and what we're doing. It's something that is kind of magical. And that's why I want to say, when you do journal, or when you are working on this, don't get caught up in things that are going to set you back. It's like, these lights I have in here are stupid expensive. And if I'd have known that when I was planning them, I wouldn't have gotten them. So don't limit yourself before you even get started. I feel like the journal is to dream big, especially with a mood board. And in our office and in our team, we say "what if" a lot, and that's okay to keep doing that. You'll notice on the top of this wall, there's this wooden A. This is kind of a goofy project that I worked on a while back, because I did a lot of A's just as art house. You can also see one over here made out of Lego on the top of this. And it was kind of a hobby and something I built. And nothing surprised me more than when we were rebranding ourselves and the team said, we should use that A. That's about how we are. We construct things, we build things. We're all about structure and color and this spunkiness. And that was a fun thing for me to realize, that the things that happen outside of the studio can be brought in and have a very practical, utilitarian aspect of what we do. When I first started working on my journals, I was doing a lot of icons for people. So when I started doing the journals, I started doing icons for myself. These are not sophisticated drawings. They're not even that good at all. But I wanted to start recording things like, I want to have nice grass in my backyards and planting and backyard pavers. I want to be able to send my 2 kids to college, and I want to be able to buy shoes for my wife, and I want to be in good health. So it's like these little things that start to act as reminders to you that when you see them at a later time, you recognize them, and hopefully they make it into your life just a little bit easier. And if that's all it does, then that's, in my opinion, a big win. As my journal increased, and as I was carrying it with me all the time, I had a business coach that I hired who asked me to keep the journal. She said, you need to record what you're doing as a CEO and as a businessman, and do this thing. So you can see everything from, recording dates, and I think I had a horrible virus along in here that was holding me back. But most important is, like, we were starting to graph our performance and our financial performance in the office. And to blow up on that, these are years across the bottom. So this represents 3.5 years. The gray line is our jobs in progress. That's all the jobs that are in the office that we're working on. This kind of seismic looking line here is the sales forecast. That's all the proposals that we've written. And you can see how sometimes the jobs forecast will follow that. And then the black line here is our billing each month. And this is, these are funds and this is time. So you can start to see that you can even see a very rudimentary shadow of how high the jobs in progress are and where you can bill it. So that's very good informative information when you're working on keeping the business afloat, and you might have a couple of weeks where you're not getting any funds in and you feel like you're sucking wind, and you can look back and say, well, I didn't bill very much then, so it'll come back. And this is all a mechanism to inform you and to, I think, make you feel a little bit more comfortable about what you're doing. Something I did for a long time. I don't do this as much anymore because after a while, it becomes very pragmatic, and it's kind of in your gut about how things feel. What I have noticed that, though, is if you keep track of your numbers, they will grow. And the only thing I can blame that on is quantum physics. The observed is changed by the observer. And I think this is a very important thing. I didn't quite believe it when I first started doing it, but your numbers will grow incrementally if you keep track of them. Like I said, I don't follow that regimen as much as I did, but what I have done with my journal is whenever I get a check from somebody, I cut off the tag on it and I make an in paper out of it on each end of my book. And this reminds me a very important lesson that all entrepreneurs, whether you're a freelancer, whether you own a firm or as a designer, it's important to know that it's like these people send me money for what we do, and they call us up when it's time for them to work, and they give us funds, and it allows me to provide for others. And it is an amazing gift. It is a lesson to me in abundance. It's a lesson of the funds that you're waiting for are on their way. And if, as a designer and as a business owner, if I can keep this kind of positive thought and in my mind, it helps me deal with stuff day to day and how the business is going to run. And it's empowering, and it's good news, and it's a lesson. My business coach also reminded me, though, that it's good to record the good times, but sometimes you have to record the bad times. And I had been talking to her about the fact that a job we were working on, this guy wasn't paying us, this guy's really hard to work with, and this guy's pointing fingers. And she said, Marty, I keep hearing the same thing out of you. This is the third time I've heard this story about this guy. You need to record this in your journal. And I'm like, well, I want to keep my journal light and happy and positive. She goes, no, you need to record things so you can remind yourself what's going on. So while I was in the meeting and talking to her, I doodled this little devil that's inviting me to come work in hell with him, and come work in hell for me, and that you'll experience lies and insults and lack of information and finger pointing, and I'll maintain an adversarial relationship all the time. And oh, by the way, I'll wait 120 days before it's time to get paid. So it's like making that stupid little drawing and putting it in this book and reminding me, I have not worked with the guy since. And it's a reminder to me that it's okay to remind yourself not to be, making the same mistake over and over again. And it's okay to remind your future self. There was a certain time, if he had called, I'd have been like, oh yeah, it'll be different this time. It'll be great. But no longer, because I've committed it into the journal and committed it to a drawing. Gonna take a shift here and talk about how the journaling has helped on some of the projects we've worked on. This is Lockheed Martin. We were asked to help Lockheed Martin build a visitor center years ago for them. They were in competition with the Joint Strike Fighter that Boeing was also building. So the government was going to pick one fabricate over another. How did I get this job, you ask? I had very good relationships with an architect, not the one in the devil drawing, that asked us to be part of this. So we were brought in, and we were meeting in Fort Worth at the plant where they make F-16s and all kinds of things. There's this amazing long legacy with Lockheed about innovation and what they've done and the genius level of aircraft and space technology that they've built. So there's this thick, wonderful history of all the things that they've done. And here we are in this plant, and I'm an airplane guy like me was kind of high about the whole thing. So we're in the meetings with 4-star generals, with fighter pilots, with aircraft engineers, and website people and content people. And we did like 3 weeks of what if, where we're in the meetings and what if. And there on the first day, we're all talking about what if and how we can do things. And it felt like every time I said what if, people just kept talking and they didn't listen to me. I was I guess they saw me as the black shirt wearing Helvetica police that was doing jazz hands all the time. What if? And it was like being at a family reunion with my wife where I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So after lunch and after a break, I kind of gave up on trying to commit to this, and just listening was all I could do. And after a while, I had my journal there, and I heard people saying the same thing over and over again. They're like, wow, this needs to have a wow factor. This needs to be this glowing element. We need to be able to tell the story. So I started drawing in the journal a picture of what this could be. This is not a good illustration. This is done with a Sharpie in the journal while nobody was watching. And all I was doing was recording what people were saying. These are fast. These are just like very scrubby sketches. And it talked about the ambassadors of the company on one side and the clients on the other side, and that there could just be this big glowing table that tells a story, that has a map on it, that has perhaps a video on it that can be controlled. The person that was facilitating the workshop stopped and looked over my shoulder and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, it sounds like you need to start documenting what's going on. And you guys are talking about a wow factor. It needs to be a large lit map." And he looked at me for a long time and said, "Keep doing that." So that's what I did. I kept coming to the meetings for several days. And as we talked and as I listened, the meetings got more refined, and people would be asking, "Well, how do you show that the aircraft interacts with a satellite?" I said, "Well, you can build a model of a satellite and shine a light on it when it comes time to tell that story, and that there could be big videos from the cockpit that shows how somebody interacts with a satellite and all that." And at that point, I would hear again, "Okay, keep doing that." I found out I started getting invited to more of these meetings, and they said it's important that I was at these meetings, and I knew that because they'd say, "Bring your pen and your book." So it was something that's fun as a designer, as a young designer, and we're working on this work. And it occurred to me, it's like, we all want to be in demand and be cool and be good looking and be clever. But what's really wonderful is to be useful. And I felt like my journal and what I was doing in these meetings made me useful. And that's very empowering. And I think that can be that way for anybody that has a journal, that if you're just keeping track of stuff, even if it's not noticed, you've got it frozen in your mind. You've got it frozen in time. As we kept working on these things, as time moved on, you can see that they started to get a little more refined. And we were taking pictures of people that were in the plant and in the meetings, and that we're all part of this story and populating our displays with them. And that caused magic. I mean, this was something where people would recognize other folks from the team, and we were able to tell these stories. These are all very rough. You know, these are put together. These were actually just cut and paste. This information also informed the team about what this can look like. That, you know, maybe that big round table is in the middle of this oval and everything has this kind of oval feeling about it. And the architect built this model with our team, and we were able to show this to the client, and it was very informative. It got them on the same page. Then again, you know, you can already start to see that the satellite models are making their way into the drawings, and here's the table. It's gotten smaller, but it's still a source of light. It still glows. That there's this big map on the wall that's telling this story. And again, it's populated with folks from the meeting. Here's the room that was built a year and a half later. Here's your glowing table. Here's your panels of stories. This is a projector up here. We added a night sky with LEDs in it that looks like stars, and then created content for all these pieces around here that that reflects solutions and performance and commitment to quality. And this was like a year and a half project that was very intense, lots of work. But one of the things I'm most proud of is you look at this picture that was done and all fabricated, and you go back to a drawing that was done on day 3 of a workshop, and you can see where all this came from. And this again is one of those stories, I think, as designers, that we can tell people, that we are empowered to tell people, to say, my God, talk about a return on investment. This was a stupid little sketch done with a Sharpie pen in a journal a year and a half before this $7 million visitor center was created. And these drawings and our process and what the team figured out from this and all of our exploration created this visual handrail to take us from the very inception all the way to the built project. And Lockheed ended up winning this contract for a $23 billion aircraft program. So it's something that really changed the way we work, changed the way I work, that it can be scary to show people your drawings. It can be scary to be in meetings with people that wonder if you're worthwhile. But if you're a good designer and you can work on that, that's a story that you can tell, and that's something that you can bring along, because we are not just the Helvetica police. It's like towards the end of this project, after all these drawings and after we were working on them, I went from being a graphic designer for these people to almost being a shaman, because we were able to make these thoughts and these ideas whole. And it's a big return on investment for a corporation if they're going to bring a designer in on something like this. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. You can start to see some of the other design that we brought in. This was a long time ago, so there was lots of pastels in there, so I pardon you for that, but it's aged okay. On the heels of that, we were asked to work on the Denver Art Museum when Daniel Liebskin had come about and was doing the new addition to the art museum. Again, this was something that we were really flattered to be able to be on team, because it was one of the most high-level jobs that you saw in the city at the time. Early on in the meetings, I had my journal, and we were listening to the architect, we were listening to the team, and they were talking about things like the initial concept for Liebskin's museum. And if you notice, you'll see that there are intersecting lines from time to time on the building that run through it. And there's even like a gap around the bottom of the building that's called a shadow gap. And those two lines were the intersections of many different themes. Like they could be the intersection of old and new, of Western art and modern art, of East and West. So started to think right in that first meeting about, you know, how those rules or how those glyphs and those lines could make their way into the signage, and that the signage might be informed by the way, the shape of the building, that it's non-orthogonal, and that perhaps the signage itself also sits in a little bit of a pit and has the shadow gap around it. So these were designs that we were first starting to work on initially, that the team was able to see, that I think helps move the job forward. Again, pictures in a journal that we're just kind of scribbling around. We did lots and lots of these kinds of drawings, so not all of them made it, but this was very informative to the project. At one point in the project, I was being asked to detail how these pieces would meet the ground, how they would look, and how they would fasten inside the space. I don't know how to do that. I'm not an engineer. I'm a graphic designer. I was fortunate enough to work with some architects on this, but the facilitator, the guy that was in charge, the job captain who was in charge of this whole project, kept asking me, how's this going to attach to the floor? I'd be like, well, let's talk to the engineer. Let's do this. And he would send me he'd send me another email. He said, we need to have this information from you soon, Marty. And then I noticed he added like 3 or 4 people to it. And after a week, there was like this huge line of people that he had put on this list as he was asking for this information. And I realized I was having my demise documented by him. He was working on getting rid of me. So there was lots of emails, there was lots of conversations, there was lots of information going back and forth, and it would just get worse every time it came back and forth. So I finally grabbed my journal and went over and saw him, make an appointment, went over and saw him in the construction trailer, and I said, John, how would you do this? You go, well, this is your job, you usually know how to do this. It's like, you are an expert at this, John. You can help me determine how we're gonna do this. And I said, these big acrylic pieces are gonna mount in the ground. How are we gonna do this? So he said, well, if it was me, I'd build an aluminum cuff that fits under the floor. So I would draw something and show it to him. It's like this. He goes, no, like it needs to be bigger. So I draw it bigger. I'd show it to him. He says, yeah. And then he'd say, this cuff needs to hold this thing, and it needs to be held in with glue. So to make that long story a little bit shorter, is I worked with him for a couple of hours on all the details of how this piece mounts into the floor, and did a rudimentary sketch, not this one, and showed it to him. I said, is this kind of what we're talking about? And after our time together, he said, yeah, that's what we're looking for. And I went back and I did this drawing with my Bic pen that has 4 colors in it, and kind of showed all the things that we're doing, and got this through, and he understood it. So this is to let you know that it's okay to dream out of your league. Ask people, collaborate with them. It'll make things better. Here's some of that signage that we were talking about. Here's floor. Here's the way this whole building felt. Here's some of our models of lines intersecting. You can start to see how it all fit together. Same kind of process is going on with Boston Children's Hospital. We're working with them about creating distractions for small children as they walk through the hospital. They settled on this kind of pop-up drawing that we showed. Here's some of the refinements to that. Here's how it made its way into the journal and how we're doing things, how things come together. Elements from other jobs that we could pick up and say, we used this mechanical box on this one job. We know how much that costs. We know how that works. What if we put a different face on each box and put these on different levels in the hospital, and they could have cranks on them that a little kid can turn and things happen. Got some antique toys and took them apart. These, of course, are erector sets, so that we could build these pieces in the office to show the client what we're thinking. little diorama model. And you can see how the dioramas fit into this. Here's the crank in the background. This is 7 feet high and 15 feet long. And here's a little crank that a kid, that's low enough that a kid in a wheelchair could come up and turn that, and bees go around the hive, and a squirrel runs in and out of the tree, and an otter pops up and down. So all of these work towards telling this story and letting people do that, but it's all, you know, keeping track of all this stuff in the journal and how we work and how the mechanics work. My last job, and I'm going to show you about, is some work that we did in Abu Dhabi, and early ideas about what the signage looks like, how it works, how it feels, what is inspired by it. Are these, you know, from sails in the boat? Keeping track of all the little drawings that we do about banners, about signage, about placemaking, about how things will look. Creating this botanical gardens opening to let folks know that that's where you get in, and how it all is built. A lot of these drawings we did just went right to a fabricator and they got built over there, which is not a way that we like to work, but it was going very fast. We didn't have a lot of control over that. You start to see the signage that starts to evolve. You know, keeping track of the colors, keeping track of branding, all the little things that go into doing this. And then a couple years later, this, something that we worked on, that during the day, this looks like a grove of trees, and at night, because everybody goes to this at night because it's so hot there, folks show up to it at about 10:30 at night. So this is this big glowing cube that really calls out entrance to folks. You can see some of the signage, multiple languages, cutouts that allow light to play on the surface, wayfinding. We also got to do banners, more icons, into the signage entrance. This is a bus that goes out to schools in Abu Dhabi to start to kind of advertise the project for kids so that they can get interested in it. Here's a view of the park at night. Water's a big part of it. Light's a big part of it. Just the whole magic. I'm very proud of this because there's a lot of design firms have projects that they've done in the Middle East that end up going into drawers. And this got built. And this got built because I think we kind of doggedly pursued this, and we made it work. And we were tried to provide our client with all the information we could so that they could build this stuff correctly and in a timely way. And this is now one of the jewels of Abu Dhabi. It's a place for women and children to go where they're safe and where they can learn about the Gulf and animals and flora and fauna. And it's a cool thing. We've gotten many other jobs across the world because we're able to do this. Since this is about journals, I had asked folks in my office to send me pictures of their journals. I've always wanted to try to get other folks to work on journals, and I was just amazed at the stuff that they send me, because people in my office are they're quiet. They're some of them are introverted. They're all fabulously talented and designers. Here's some of Daisy's work of type and exploration and experimenting with readability and color. And she's always doing this kind of stuff. Abby in my office is famous for making lists, and her lists are famous about checking things off, and it'll be how much water she drank each day and if she's called this client. But you can also see this very well thought out articulation of how signage meets the ground, how it looks, how it works. And that's a drawing that anybody could understand. It's, you know, is that a very sophisticated illustration that's ready for production? No, it's for discussion between all of us. And you can start to see, you know, how she keeps track of stuff, because it helps, I think, to be a designer, especially in what we do. It helps if you're a little obsessive and if you really keep track of stuff. Hunter in our office is like working on posters, working on information, He's obviously working on this kind of topographic field, doing things, and it has a terrific energy about it. That's not where I want to go. Yeah, there's where I want to go. And Zach in our office, his journals are beautiful. They're art inspired. They're a lot of travel, a lot of thinking, and I too will like always get stuff from traveling and put it in the book to inform it, because it makes you feel great when you look back on it after a while. But really tickled by this kind of stuff that people are doing. I don't know if they were journaling before they came to work with us, but they are now, and it's a big plus. I'm going to leave you with one of my clients. When he first saw my journal, and the architect we were working with said, "Oh, have you seen Marty's journal? Do you see how he thinks?" And she opened it up, and he looked at it for a long time, and he looked at me and said, "Looks like Exhibit A found in the psycho killer's bedroom." That's my show. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this. If at the very least, go get a pen, go get a journal, and write in it. There's no wrong way to do it. There's no right way to do it. It's a very personal thing, and I happen to think it'll make your life richer.
Thank you, Marty. And I really love this. I didn't see the end, but I saw some pages last week, and it's very exciting to see how everything comes together. And also, they always say it's not the final product, but the journey. So I want to thank you for like opening up your journal for us and see the process. Guys, we have the Q&A in the bottom. If you have questions for Martin, feel free to write them there, and we are going to answer to them live now.
You bring up a good point, Lisa, with the journal and the jury. It's like, I think we're all, as designers, we're all very aware of the fact that very little of the things that we design get built, or not all of our ideas get made. So it's like keeping them in a journal is a great practice, because they're always there. Sometimes they can inform another idea, but you also don't lose them. And it's great. I find if I'm flipping back through some of the work that we've done years ago, if we're putting together a proposal or something like that, it's always nice to look back at the work that's come before and say, God, we're pretty good. We did some good work on this job.
So we have a question from Jeremy. He said, great presentation. Any recommendation type of glue to paste in external paper media?
Say the last part of that again, please.
Any recommendation on type of glue to paste in external paper media?
You know, it's any way that you can help tell your story, whether it's a PDF or whether it's a journal, whether it's a video. It's I'm always a fan of seeing people's process and seeing how they got there, and a journal is a great way to do that. It's important to keep a record of those things, and it may not be the first thing you show to somebody, but it is something that if they're interested and they want to know how you think, that you can always have that. And again, whether it's a drawing book, a sketchbook, a website, somehow my job here at the office is I'll follow people around while they're doing things, and I'll take pictures of it and I'll document it so that I can show to people later on. It's like, we built this, we did this. This is something we do all the time, and this is something we will do for your job. Did I answer the question?
I guess so. We have actually another one from Sean. He said, what is your preferred journal size to use? Small pocket size or more like 8.5 by 11, larger size?
I got this big lecturum. It allows me, I'm on, before COVID, I was on airplanes a lot. So it gives me, a chance to do.
Is that letter size?
This is probably, it's a little bit larger than that, but it gives me a chance to do big spreads and think about things and like put stickers in it. I've had little bitty traveling journals before, And people in my office sometimes have the little journals that are this big. It's like, I can't make the statements that I want to make in that. But this is me. You might have to try a couple of different ones out. But it's like, if I can put this in a laptop bag and carry it around with me, it's a good companion in restaurants and in airplanes and when I'm drawing. And I find that I take it with me everywhere. And these get, they get beat up after a while because they're with you all the time for, one of these will last about 1.5 years for me.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I have actually another one, but mine is like slightly smaller. I think there is no right or wrong. And like when you make a journal, it's not about perfection. It's about just get it done, right?
My son's a writer and he has the field notes and they're about this big and he just bangs through those. He's always got them. I like these because they have like a pocket in the back and you're always finding things on trips that are hard to keep. So it's a great place to have like a little pocket of keeping all of the little pieces of printed ephemera.
So another question from Michael. Do you journal at a specific time of the day?
It's a good question. I notice, especially through this time with the quarantine, if I go get coffee in the morning someplace and I take my journal with me, that's a great way to start out the day. It almost allows me to have a plan and I'm more positive and I'm more rested in the morning. So I have a sunnier outlook to what I'm doing. And it also allows me to kind of be grateful for doing what I'm doing. And to, if I'm making some checklists, I can do that. At night, I'm usually kind of, I don't like the rest of you. I'm probably a little tired of being a designer at 9 o'clock at night. So I usually don't draw on that. It's a great thing to have if I'm traveling. Airport, it really makes an airport a much nicer place to be. Or if you're waiting, I notice when I travel, I spend a lot of time waiting for somebody to pick me up or to be in a meeting. I'm also at my office in lots of conference calls. So I will, a lot of time, and people give me a hard time about, you're not paying attention, you're doodling. But I'm, like a lot of designers, I'm a very cognitive thinker and I'm a very kinetic thinker. And I actually, and something that none of my teachers understood when I was in school, but some of my clients understand now. It's like, I listen better when I'm drawing. I listen better when I'm pushing a pen around because it allows me to focus. And that's a very hard thing for some of your clients to understand until they see the benefits of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because when I'm in meeting, I'm like start doing stuff and people are like, what? Like, are you listening? Well, actually, I like to have my journal like next to my bed because sometimes when I go to sleep, I cannot sleep and then I start having an idea and then I wake up and say, oh my God, I have to write it down.
That's a really good point because there's sometimes I lose ideas that I get at night because the journal isn't around. But to keep it right there, that's a great trick and that's a smart thing to do. But I just find the journal is important to me after I've had a really fantastic day or after I've had a really crappy day. It's good to have it there and to bounce things off of it. And there's times when I will come home and I'll be talking to my wife and it's just like kind of dragging and worried about the business or worried about things. And she says, when was the last time you were in your journal? I said, well, it's been about 3 days. She goes, you should pick up your journal and like write in that because it makes you a nicer person to be around. That and drink more water and go for a run.
Hey, everyone has his own way to do it, right? So one more question from Ellison. How many journals/notebooks do you go through a year? Do you keep them to reference later or have any specific organization to access ideas you have sketched out in the past?
If I could pick up my computer and move it, I have a shelf over here that has 20 journals on it. They're all about the size of this one. Some of the bigger ones have 2.5 years in them. or other years. Some others, lately, I've been banging through them in about a year and a half, and I do keep them. And it's really good to, here's an old one right here that is journal number 7. And I started that in October 2005. And it has, similar spreads, traveling, that kind of thing. It's terrific to go back through it and to see what I was thinking of at the time. And some of the ideas that I was catching. It's something that I do go back and reference from time to time, and I'm never sorry I do that. There's times that might be worried about the business or something like that, and you can go back 10 years and realize, God, things aren't changing. I was worried about the business then, but the business is much stronger now, and I have this powerhouse of super talented people that I work with. So it's a little friendly reminder of where you were. And that's one of the best things about it is I would hate to lose these old journals because they remind me of old ideas. They remind me of old projects. And because of the way I journal and I draw my kids, it's kind of fun back and see, pictures of my kids when they were babies that I drew, because it takes you right back to that. I mean, it's like such a psychological flag gets tripped when you look at those old things. It takes you right back to where you were. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
In which year did you start your first one?
Well, I did one in college. I had an English class that was English literature, and we had to keep a journal in that class. And I learned pretty quick, as we all do, that graphic designers have a real leg up when it comes to being graded by journal. We can make journals look really good. And I kept a journal for a few years after that, then I stopped. And that was like 1979 that I was doing that kind of work. So I started doing it then, and then picked it back up with my business coach, and I have not looked back.
A lot of them, I guess they're part of your library with all the design.
Yeah, there's like 20 plus right now.
Wow. One question from Harrison: pencil or pen?
What is the question?
Pencil or pen?
Pen. Sometimes I'll draw with pencil, but because I'm right-handed, I drag my hand across things a lot, and I hate when things smear. So I look really hard for pens that have ink that dry quickly and that are kind of indelible, because the pencil fades after a while. Maybe it's something to do with my ego that I want to leave an indelible mark, but I like pens, and I look carefully for journals that can handle pages that they don't bleed through, so you don't get this mess, that you get this kind of clean, crisp presentation each time.
Sam asked, line or blank paper?
I like blank. It's like, it's okay if it's okay if stuff kind of rambles along and goes up and down. My kid just graduated high school, but I'm less concerned about it being perfect. And sometimes I'll just put something in there crooked, because you can tell I'm very obsessive, and you need to remind yourself to stay out of the grid every so often. And some of my most packed pages are pages in the journal that there's a lot going on. And it's always good to look at those and see all the activity. There's times when I'm looking at it and be like, God, I'm just exhausted at night, and I want to come home and just have a drink and go to sleep. And I'll look at the journal and realize it's like, because there's a lot going on, and you come by your weariness honestly.
Is the journal just about like work stuff, or do you also use it for like personal events?
originally it was just to be about business, but life and personal stuff made its way into it. So yeah, there's some pages that I make sure I mark so that they're not for public consumption because I'm ranting about something or raving about something. So it should be a pretty good view into my daily life. These all belong to my my two boys. It's like when I'm gone, they can have them and they can do what they want with them. But I mean, who wouldn't want to have a journal from their father when they were teenagers so that they'd know what their old man was thinking about? And they're going to find out that I was like worried about them and thinking about money and hopefully not spending my days being a jerk.
So one last question from Eleanor. She said, to follow up on Jeremy's question, what is your preferred type of glue to use addition into the pages?
You know, sometimes like if I'm traveling and I'm on a trip, I'll just take a roll of tape and tape stuff in there and it starts to get stacked up and it starts to have kind of a messy vitality about it that I like. But here in the office, we have spray mount, which I hope it's not going to take too many years off my life, but I can spray mount, you know, drawings into it and they stay flat and they stay crisp. And I like the neatness about it.
Spray mount, yeah. I learned about that when I was in college.
Yeah, you have to like, I step outside and I hold my breath while I do it.
So we don't have any more questions. I think it's 8:50. I want to thank all the attendees today because everyone is still live. So Marty, thank you for your time. Guys, just so to give you a recap, we're going to move the conversation on Slack. I'm going to post again the link now in the chat. If you have more questions for Marty, you can go there and he's going to be live for a little bit to answer. Otherwise, we're going to send a recap email later today or tomorrow. We all volunteer again, so please give us some time. And you're going to have a recap with Marty's info, contact, and then you can also watch again this video. This was personally very inspiring for me, so I hope it was for you guys too. And maybe if you don't have it yet, you can start your own journal. And at the end of the day, it's not how you make it, which glue, which page, is about the journey of your journal, right? Marty, do you want to add anything else?
Just thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. I can talk about journals all day long. And if just a handful of you go out and buy journals and start to draw in them and like start to record your life, I would consider this a huge hit. It's fun to chat about it, and I appreciate the attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty, and thanks everyone. We're gonna see you next Thursday with Mona Lucero. Bye.
Adios.